Here is what filmmakers want to see from the a7S IV. At the time of making this video, we're coming up on 3 years since the release of the Sony a7S III camera, and in this video, I want to look into the future and talk about the 3 biggest things that filmmakers want to see in the successor to this camera. Before we get to those, though, I want to blow your mind with a thought. What if there isn't an a7S IV? To be clear, the a7S series has been incredibly popular, but if you ask most filmmakers today what Sony camera they want to buy, they aren't going to say the a7S III. No, they're going to say they want an FX3. So this is just a theory, as is the rest of this video, but I can see a future where Sony does away with the a7S line of cameras and only offers the FX line. And if you consider that the a7S is really just a video-centric version of Sony's a7 series of cameras, if we're talking about an FX3 successor, like say an FX3 Mark II or an FX4, etc., the FX cameras are just an even more video-centric versions of the S series of cameras. They're just the video-iest video cameras that you can get. Anyways, my theorizing out of the way, the first thing that the vast majority of filmmakers that I've talked to have wanted to see Sony add to the a7S IV or FX3 Mark II or whatever they come out with is the biggest, and that feature is, of course, they want to see an ND filter in this camera. It's no surprise. By far, the biggest differentiating factor between the FX3 camera and the FX6 camera is that the FX6 has the addition of an electronic variable ND filter. And if there's one thing that filmmakers want in a smaller and more compact body like the a7S IV, that's an ND filter. Heck, I'm betting that most filmmakers would be fine if the camera had to get a little bit thicker or heavier to compete with it. Even if they made the camera twice as large, it would still be smaller than the Nikon Z9, for example. Anyways, Sony has talked about adding an ND to the a7S series of cameras, but they said that there are limitations to what they can do, and namely, there are 2 restrictions. The first, of course, is, as we already discussed, the size of the camera. I do think that adding an ND would make it significantly larger, but in addition, the more difficult issue that they face is that if they add an ND filter, they may have to get rid of in-body image stabilization, a feature that the vast majority of filmmakers absolutely love, and also a feature that happens to be missing from the FX6. See, the way that Sony's electronic variable ND filter works is that it's a piece of glass that goes in front of the sensor. But whenever you consider that the sensor would be moving if it has IBIS, you're suddenly needing to add what I assume is a much bigger piece of glass, and everything just gets more complicated because it's all moving. So I'm not saying that Sony can't fix it or figure out an internal ND with IBIS, but it's definitely complicated. Now, the next addition that filmmakers want to see added to the a7S IV is a very popular request, which I know is popular because I get comments asking me if the a7S III supports this feature all the time. See, when Blackmagic introduced their cinema cameras, they added a lot of great features, including a new one that immediately all filmmakers wanted, and that feature was the ability to record via USB-C to an external hard drive. Yes, instead of you needing to spend a lot of money on memory cards, you can instead buy a relatively cheap solid-state drive and connect that to your camera with a USB-C cable and record all of your footage externally. This is super convenient, and whenever Sony released the a7S III, it included a USB-C port, so why would it not include this feature? In addition, we're also seeing Panasonic include the ability to record to an external SSD with their new S5 Mark II camera, so this would be a great feature to see Sony add to theirs as well. Speaking of Panasonic features that Sony should add to the a7S IV, though, the next feature that Sony should take from Panasonic also is the ability to record internal ProRes. ProRes is such a ubiquitous codec these days, and it's used by so many cameras and so many filmmakers when editing, that it's a no-brainer for Sony to work to add ProRes recording natively to the a7S IV. Of course, the file size may end up being larger, but remember, if you're recording via USB-C to an external hard drive, it's going to be pretty easy to have an SSD that's large enough to handle all of this data. Now, speaking of large file sizes, there's a little bit of a bonus here, but there is something else that I know that pretty much every filmmaker wants, but it's going to be hard for Sony to get due to legal reasons. But the next thing that filmmakers want is for the a7S IV to have internal RAW recording. This is a huge ask, and Sony has not wanted to do it before, due mainly, I believe, to legal reasons. The main thing that you need to keep in mind anytime we talk RAW video is that RED, the camera company, not the color, currently have a patent on compressed internal RAW video recording, and they actually recently applied for another patent and were granted that as well. Red has been extremely aggressive about protecting this patent and have sued Sony in the past when they were considering implementing RAW recording internally in their cinema cameras. This has led to Sony's cinema line of cameras requiring an external RAW recording module, and all of their cheaper cameras like the a7S III, FX3, and FX6 only supporting RAW recording to an external recorder like an Atomos. Here's where things have recently changed though. In 2022, Nikon added compressed internal RAW to their Z9 camera and Red sued them over it. But in April 2023, Nikon essentially won when the case against them was dismissed, and they are now allowed to use compressed internal RAW recording in all their cameras. I would love to see Sony figure out what Nikon did and be able to implement RAW in the same way that they're able to in their cameras, and I'm betting that many other filmmakers would like this as well. Codecs aside, there is something else that I think many filmmakers would really appreciate if Sony implemented in the a7S IV. Here's the deal. Whenever a filmmaker asks me what picture profile they should film in with the a7S III camera, I really only have two recommendations for them. For the vast majority of filmmakers, I recommend that they film in S-Log3 because it is going to maximize the video quality that you can get from the camera. It's one of the main reasons you buy a 10-bit camera, and while it may take some more work to color grade, the results are completely worth it. Not to mention, if you use my color presets, which I've tuned to work specifically with S-Log3, they make color grading really easy. I'll link to those down in the video description. That said, some filmmakers do not want to film in S-Log3, and I completely understand. Either these filmmakers are working on a time crunch where they do not have time to color grade, or they're working with a client who wants to have the unedited files delivered directly to them, and they know that the client have no clue how to color grade a video, so delivering them log footage would be a nightmare. For those filmmakers that do not want to film in S-Log3, the only other picture profile that I ever recommend they use is S-Cinetone. This picture profile is going to give you a fantastic looking image that doesn't quite reach the same level of dynamic range as S-Log3, but it does look great straight out of camera, and most importantly, it looks dramatically better than how the camera looks when you have the picture profile set to off. So here's my recommendation for Sony with the a7S IV. I want to see Sony make S-Cinetone the default picture profile for the camera. Quit letting filmmakers buy this camera and film by default with the picture profile off, which gives them the opportunity to complain that the colors don't look good. There's a reason that filmmakers buy Canon cameras, for example, and don't bother using C-Log because they film in the standard picture profile and it looks gorgeous and contrasty straight out of camera. My point is that if you want your footage to look gorgeous and contrasty straight out of your Sony camera, you need to use S-Cinetone. If Sony were to make S-Cinetone the default and then take picture profile off and make that its own custom picture profile that filmmakers could still use if they needed to, I just think that many filmmakers would be dramatically happier with the footage they were getting straight out of camera, and the footage that we see from Sony cameras all across YouTube would look dramatically better too. Speaking of looking dramatically better, I know I just mentioned them, but I'm going to mention them again. If you want to make your video edits look dramatically better, you gotta check out my color presets. They're going to make your footage look incredible, and they work with Sony cameras, including both the S-Log3 and S-Cinetone picture profiles, as well as other cameras like Panasonic, Canon, Nikon, etc., and I will link to them down below. Also down below, I'm going to link to my Edit Videos Like a Pro guide. This guide is going to walk you through some of the biggest things that you can do to edit your videos better and faster. It's completely free. You can download it, the link down in the video description. Now, did I miss anything that Sony should include in the a7S IV? What do you think that future Sony cameras need? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.